Hey everybody! Today we're going to talk about the difference between the two major forms of writing, prose versus poetry. So what are they? You've heard of poetry. I think you can figure that out. And you actually use prose all the time. You might not just have heard of the name before. So what is prose? Remember, you're taking notes as I go. Prose is writing or speaking, the way we usually talk. There is no rhyme, rhythm, or meter. Most of what we write and read is written in prose. Everyday writing, everyday speaking is prose. We start with capital letters, we end with end punctuation, lines wrap around, go from sentences to paragraphs. You can find prose just about everywhere. You can find it in novels, in newspapers, in text messages. It might not have right grammar, but it's still prose. Scripts, plays. And this explanation is written in prose. So all of this is what prose is. So we're giving you the vocabulary to name the type of writing. What does prose look like? Here's an example about a time I went to CVS. Yesterday, I went to the store to buy milk, and the craziest thing happened. I walk into CVS, and there was no milk anywhere. I asked the cashier what happened, and she said, the power is out on this entire block, and all of the milk went bad. So notice elements of prose. You've got standard capitalization and punctuation. Every sentence starts with a capital, ends with an end punctuation. Here we've got exclamation points, periods, right? You've got the dialogue, you've got quotes around what people are saying. There are no lines. The sentence runs on to the next line because it ran out of space. It just keeps wrapping around from sentence to sentence until you start a new paragraph. There is no beat or rhythm. It just flows right out. There's no but-ump type of beat or rhythm going on. Now, on the other hand, what is poetry? There are many forms of poetry. I'm going to kind of simplify it here for us a little bit. Poetry is writing or speaking with rhythm, which is a beat, and or meter, which is lines of a specific length. So you can find poetry where? Songs and raps. Lyrics are actually poems that are set to music, right? Obviously, you can find it in poems. You can find it in plays. Sometimes you read novels, which we're going to do, that have poems mixed in, right? But these are the most common places that we find poetry. So what does it look like? Let's take that same little CVS story that was in our prose and see what it looks like as a poem. The street is dark, I do not notice. The CVS is empty, I do not notice. The shelves are bare, I do not notice. The milk has gone bad, I do not know what to do. Let's look at those elements of poetry, right? The beginning of every single line is capitalized. So I can, if I choose to, as the poet, capitalize the start of every line, right? Because you have what's called poetic license. Punctuation is flexible. I can put the periods wherever I want, but just like regular reading, I don't pause until I see punctuation. Distinct lines. Phrases and ideas are broken into separate lines. Notice the kind of the rhythm and the repetition going on here, right? Because I do not notice. I do not notice. It keeps going. There's that beat. There's that rhythm of a poem. So let's recap poetry versus prose. You've got prose. When you look at the structure of prose, you have sentences, paragraphs. You follow rules of language of conventions, which is capitalization, punctuation, things we talk about all the time. And the writer must identify potential audience and genre and form, has to figure out how they're setting it up. Poetry structure has lines instead of sentences, has stanzas instead of paragraphs. But again, they still have to figure out their form and their audience. But they don't need to figure out the genre because poetry is a genre. The forms of them, how can you present them? Prose could be expository, informational, persuasive, entertainment, science fiction, blogging, narrative. It goes on, right? Poems could be an ode, a sonnet, a lyric, a ballad, a free verse, epic, narrative, couplets. You wrote some haikus this year. Those are poems, right? Literary devices, though, that's what they have in common. Both of them use all of those literary devices you learn about all the time. They both have figures of speech, such as metaphors, similes. They have rhyme patterns sometimes. They use analogies and repetition and personification, symbolism, irony, theme, tone, alliteration, exaggeration, which we know is hyperbole, onomatopoeia, repetition, mood, plot, setting. Did you notice I repeated repetition just to show you what it is? Those are kind of the elements. So when you're reading, your brain needs to know, am I reading prose or am I reading a poem? Because they're presented differently and you have to break them down differently. All right, good luck with it.